Hey everybody, this is Richard and welcome to another episode of Fatal Error. This show began as a research project for me to understand how entrepreneurs and founders think about the climate emergency and figure out ways in which all organizations, not just non-profits, can become climate positive. Today's guest is Rebecca Burgess, CEO of City2Sea, an organization devoted to reducing plastic usage and pollution. Rebecca recently made the 35 under 35 list as one of the UK's top female entrepreneurial talents. In our conversation, we cover her personal journey, how City2Sea generates behavioural change in corporations and consumers, and her advice to aspiring entrepreneurs. Let's hear what she has to say. So the best place to start would be just a small intro to yourself, right? So like I said, I saw your name in the 35 under 35, I think female entrepreneurs list or something like that on Management Today. I found it in the meantime.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, right? So how did you get there, right? What's the short version, but still, what's been the route that got you to that point?
Yeah, so I can talk to you a little bit about City2Sea, which is obviously where I am currently chief executive, and sort of my route to there. So if you don't know, City2Sea is a not-for-profit campaigning to stop plastic pollution at source. We run behaviour change campaigns tackling those items most commonly littered on our beaches, in our rivers and in our oceans. So a lot of that, as you can imagine, is single-use plastic bottles, coffee cups, cotton bud sticks, and sanitary products, so tampons and pads. So a lot of our campaigns are targeting those, and we work really hard to not only engage the individual to change their behaviour, but also working with retailers to stock more reusable products and plastic free products, but also corporates, big businesses that employ all of these amazing individuals and can really be the place to see significant change. So I came to City2Sea in April 2018. It had been started back in 2015 by founder Natalie Fee, and she was just personally very motivated by the awful things that she was seeing in her hometown of Bristol. Lots of single-use plastics being washed up and sort of a lack of care. And she'd also just seen the Albatross film, so if you haven't watched that, definitely recommend watching it.
I haven't. No. Is it? Yeah. Is it available on
it's
Netflix?
Well worth a watch. But the organisation had spent a couple of years just doing really small projects, very funding dependent. It was mainly built from volunteers, and so not a lot of time had been spent on sort of really maximising what the organisation was able to do. And then some major funding came into place at the beginning of 2018, and that's when I was hired originally as sort of a partnerships consultant to sort of oversee more of the commercial relationships that they wanted to build, then became director, and then in December that year was made chief executive. So I guess that's one of the quick things to know is a startup environment allows you to make progression very quickly, because obviously if you're a very small team of 4 to begin with and you're having to do absolutely everything, you get the opportunity to really lead that way very quickly.
Sure, but that's I guess very humble of you in some respects, but I guess, that doesn't take away the fact that you need to be still at the very minimum, like, good at what you're doing, right? So
definitely.
How big is City2Sea at the moment? Because you're not a small organization.
No, so there's nearly 30 of us now.
That's bigger than many startups I've come across, So
yeah.
What is it like being CEO of 30 people?
In a pandemic, it's interesting, that's for sure. No, I think the good thing to note is from 2018 when I started till now, it's only been 2 years, and yet the organisation has changed phenomenally, like not only in size and the amount of people that we hire, but in its professionalism. Our brand is really strong. Our campaigns are now global. We've got an awesome team, obviously, and we're winning awards left, right, and centre. So I think
Yes.
I think it is amazing, sort of the transition that we've been through, and I hope that's in part because I've obviously been running it, and I would say that that comes from sort of a different background, than sort of just one straightforward road to where I've ended up. So I worked a lot in sort of not-for-profits before, but mainly in sort of their corporate partnerships. So how do you unlock the potential of businesses to create social change, whether that's to do with healthcare or homelessness or now the environment? I think knowing and recognizing that businesses hold the power, that they do have the money and the means to make the change.
So that's exactly the point, right? Something that's at the back of my mind, and I don't know what to do with it just yet, but businesses, large and small, do hold a large amount of power and influence, both financial, but also the loyalty they have from the staff and employees, the effect they have on consumers, a small change in how somebody produces a product, or, even writes an instruction manual could have a very big knock-on effect. So, how do you work with these companies to change their, because, I come at this mainly from a sort of a climate change point of view. So specifically in my head, it's like, I'm interested in agriculture and farming and habitats destruction and stuff like that. You're a bit more focused on the pollution side of it, but essentially we're still talking about generating change, right? You need people, companies to change something. So how do you folks go about doing this, right? And what's your, I'd love it if you could walk me through a campaign or a process that has worked, right?
So everything that we do is centered on our values. And I think that is something that big businesses forget to sort of really cement down early, is to be a values-based organization, because anyone can be. And the values really drive everything that we do. And part of that, one of our values is to be balanced. So this is where we're a critical friend and a trusted peer to businesses. So we play that sort of middle zone of criticizing them where they aren't acting fast enough, but trying to engage with them and influence them from within, rather than just sort of making everyone feel guilty and sort of the bad guys. So I would say that's really important for us here at City to See, that we are balanced.
Do these organizations come to you, or do you go out and find them?
Both. So we're really lucky with one of our campaigns called Refill, which is our biggest campaign. It's a drinking water campaign. Really simple premise, and actually it's an app, which is interesting because obviously Fatal Error is hugely started with tech in mind, and part of City to See is a tech company in that sense, because the Refill app is a huge product of ours and a campaign of ours, and that involves over 30,000 businesses who are sort of listed on the app as places that they are happy to refill your water bottle for free, rather than having to buy a plastic water bottle. So there's simple actions like that that help the initial engagement with these big businesses. So we're talking sort of massive retailers and cafe chains like Starbucks and Costa and Morrison's, all engaged in this campaign. And what we end up doing with them is taking them on a journey through engagement, where we start with drinking water, but what next? So we launched a contactless coffee campaign to tackle the takeaway disposable coffee cup industry. We've also going to expand the app as of October to include lunch boxes, zero waste shopping, more sort of listing places where you can live with less plastic.
So what's the benefit to them? How do you work out? I mean, I can think of a number of benefits, but the point is, what's the benefit that that you sell to them, right? So you mentioned Starbucks, for example. I guess it could be what gets them to say, okay, we'll do this and we'll change our habits.
So I think there's a number of benefits. So the first one is everyone is working towards an end goal. Everyone is aware of climate emergency, the state that our environment is in with regards to plastic pollution in particular, whether that's authentic in their corporate responsibility strategies is another question, but everyone is aware of it and they're making public commitments to their customers about it. So first benefit is to be seen to actually be acting on.
So in a sense, it doesn't matter whether they believe it or not, because if there's a perception that it's important, then you can work with that anyway.
Because even if they don't think that it's important, if they're making change within their business and it's leading to positive results, it's still progress from where you were originally. I'd say the second benefit is sort of the customer demand and concern around environmental issues. So if they can be seen to be a thought leader, taking it one step further and actually really separating them out from their competitors by taking a more proactive environmental stance, that obviously will tick their boxes, both on a PR and positive brand association, but also on their sales. And I guess the third area is around having the opportunity to lead something from the start. So a lot of businesses want to be the ones that have come up with the idea or made something possible. And that's the benefit of
it's still a little bit self-serving, right? And from their perspective. So how do you make it last, right? Because if for example, if the benefit or the value is in being seen to be the first, then it's diminishing returns if you second, third, fourth, etc., right? So what's the benefit then if you're the 100th company, right?
You've proven then the sort of commercial benefits. So you've proven by using sort of those front runners as like a test case, you gather the evidence to why it makes sense for other business to do. So then it's actually not about a environmental choice, it's actually a commercial choice then. It's actually a marketing choice then, because you've basically
like everybody's doing it, you're being left behind. It's a bit like contactless payments. It's not, it's like everybody needs it nowadays. That kind of adoption curve, I suppose. So at the other end of that spectrum, so you've got companies changing some of their behavior, but obviously one of the things your organization is coming from is pollution, right? Which is a different thing to just use. So for example, you mentioned the beach, littered with coffee cups, tampons, cotton bud sticks, and things like that. Why, have you done any research, or do you have, why do people do that? Because it's a sort of a different end of the behavior spectrum, which is, why not just dispose of it in the right way? What causes people to litter a beach to such an extent as, pictures we've seen recently post-lockdown, for example, are pretty shocking. And how do you change that?
So again, I think there's multiple reasons why there ends up being litter on our beaches. One is education. A lot of people don't know that they shouldn't flush their tampons or their wet wipes down the toilets, and that is literally a sewer going out to our oceans and our rivers. So if we can educate people more to say, actually, no, have a separate bin within your bathroom to dispose of those products and don't flush them down the toilet, that would solve quite a lot of the issues that we're finding, especially around sort of period products. I'd say infrastructure is a really big reason why people are littering too. You say that if people know how to dispose of it, why are they just leaving it on the beach? But actually, there's so many materials that are used in our takeaway and convenient lifestyle that the waste disposal of them is complicated. Like each council recycles different things. There's not enough bins on beaches. There's not the actual infrastructure to enable and support people to dispose of their items in the right way. And I'm not, and some people just don't care about the environment, and we do need to acknowledge that. Like, I'm not living in my bubble of everyone's green and wants to see the world that I want to see, and we need to make it cheap, easy and convenient, and just the go-to option for everyone that isn't emotionally connected to the environment, because without making that happen, they're just not going to change their behavior.
Right. Which is a little bit sad in some respects, because we probably maybe are a little bit aligned on, you mentioned well, it's not everybody has to be green, but I suppose there's like I don't even like the term green very much anymore, but I'm always surprised at how people can be kind of disinterested, right? And one of the reasons I'm kind of interested in that aspect of it is because you do need to change, for certain things to happen, you do need to change, the behaviors and understandings of various kinds of people. Have you found that so you mentioned, for example, that, in recent year or two, you've become more professional, more kind of like global and so on. Has that helped, or has it, charities kind of have a tendency to be either scrappy or else extremely sort of professional somehow? And have you found that has helped with how people sort of believe you, take you seriously in terms of the kind of messages you're trying to, send?
Yeah, I think going back to our values, one of our other values is being sort of positive and creative and brave. And I think that is where City to Sea differentiates itself from maybe some of the larger NGOs, in the sense that we have more freedom, we are more agile, we are more playful and brave with our content. And I think it's that's helped us along the way, because we're not restricted or constrained by sort of a lot of other sort of like historical things that other organizations are. And I guess that's the same in a profit making business. Like, if you've got this sort of startup mentality, I'm positive that you can quickly see opportunities and then drive them forward, rather than if you're sort of shackled by sort of history or constraints, you're not going to be as quick to see those opportunities, or you might miss those opportunities because you've spent 6 months talking about it.
Yeah. Yes. That's true. That happens in many companies, I suppose. There's always this sort of thing, and larger companies want to sort of retain that. They still call themselves startups to try and keep themselves sort of agile and give certain amounts of autonomy. And so, have you seen a change in the organization? Like, have you started to experience that change of becoming less agile? Because 30 people is, not massive, but still bigger. This must be an overhead of communication, for example, or something.
Yeah. Well, the pandemic's definitely tested our ability to quickly react. So this year was probably the first year at the beginning of the year that we had really fully formed strategies, annual company objectives, individual objectives, targets, everything absolutely beautiful, laid out for the year ahead. And we basically just had to rip it up as soon as coronavirus hit, because our biggest campaign, Refill, is all about being on the go. And we saw overnight the whole of the high street close down. So that campaign at the same time had to close down. So and I'm really proud of how we have handled that situation. And I think that shows that actually we haven't been, yes, communications had to be really thought about. I mean, we furloughed the whole team, but in 2 waves.
You did, okay.
For 3 weeks each, so not for an extended amount of time, but just to make sure that we're maximising sort of the funding that was available from the government whilst keeping everything going. And actually, it's really paid off. Like, from an external perspective, it doesn't look like we have furloughed at all. We've been even more active over the last few months than probably prior to that. But we've managed to change our plans, engage our partners, and continue to lead the way with media interviews and whole loads of other things. And I'm proud that I still think shows sort of our agility and our quick response.
So a lot of companies who've put, who furloughed staff or who furloughed staff, I suppose. One of the main reasons is loss of income, right? For those organizations. So is that something that you've experienced as well? Did you experience loss of income, and sort of where does your income come from as a charity nowadays?
Yeah, so a huge part of our income comes from companies. So from sort of either their CSR budgets or marketing or sustainability budgets, whether that's offering them consultancy or sponsorship of a campaign.
Okay.
And obviously companies have been hit. So a lot of the really great conversations that we were having to bring on some really significant new partners have gone on hold. And that is worrying. When those conversations will start up again, who knows? But we were really lucky with our existing partners to continue to engage with them, to refine our plans to still meet their needs as well as our own. But we have had to be flexible. Like, one of our biggest sort of awareness days is Refill Day, which is a big marketing opportunity for a lot of our partners, and that had to be cancelled this year, and is one of the main reasons why they work with us. So we've had to extend some contracts to cover World Refill Day for next year, and take that hit ourselves, with the hope that more will come. And we've seen things like foundation and grant funding, which we do also get, are successful at, has been reverted to sort of food banks or those hit more directly by COVID than the environmental sector. But
which kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things, but obviously doesn't make your life any easier.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to pick up on something you mentioned just now because you mentioned, you get your funding from CSR teams, for example, so this is, by CSR, you mean sort of what we call corporate social responsibility, right? Which is companies sort of dedicate a portion of their budget, I suppose, to charities or local kind of projects and so on. And that's something that always bothers me a little bit, more so more recently, because it feels like, a company can set itself up, do whatever it likes, and then make everything okay by putting a portion of their sort of income, usually a very small percentage, really, half a percentage of their revenues, to kind of greenwashing things, right? Or whatever other kind of washing we want to call it. First of all, what do you think of that? I mean, is that the case? Are CSR programs like an exercise in greenwashing generally? I'm not saying that you wouldn't take the money, but why is there this perception, right? Am I off the mark with thinking that?
I think there's definitely examples of that, especially if you look back 5-10 years ago. I think a lot of CSR teams were probably set up to be sort of a tick box exercise and didn't really have the authenticity and the sort of values piece that they do now. I think we're definitely seeing more companies investing in sustainability and being more responsible because they know that it's absolutely integral to their business going forward. So whilst there's definitely still some out there, I'm not denying that there's still greenwashing happening out there. I definitely think that it's improved a huge amount and will continue to do so when we get deeper and deeper into sort of the climate catastrophe that we're all facing, to be honest.
So what does somebody do if they don't want to do that, right? So for example, entrepreneurs say setting up something new now, or maybe it's not new, but let's talk about somebody who's setting up something new. What are the values that would avoid that happening, right? I know people, for example, who want to do something which is, you know, kind of socially good, either directly or else at least not harming anything, right? But they don't want to create a charity for whatever reason. There are lots of good reasons for creating a for-profit organization. How do you make a for-profit organization? What are the values you would suggest, right? How would you structure that organization such that you don't need a CSR program, perhaps, right?
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I'm sure you've come across it, but the B Corp movement is
Yes.
like integral to how I see for-profit businesses moving forward in this new world. And the whole premise of them is that they balance profit alongside people, so their people, their employees, but also the planet, and it's actually written into their legal entity. So
What does that mean from your perspective, right? Because I know about B Corps, and I have recently spoken to somebody, an episode which hasn't been published yet, who was talking a lot about B Corps, but not everybody sort of has the same understanding because you're like, well, you know, we write it down on a bit of paper. So what happens then, right?
So I think where a sort of B Corps are slightly different to other sort of accreditations or acknowledgements or awards is that it's a constant thing. It's constantly having to be reviewed. Their application needs to be submitted like every other year. I think they've now changed it, which means that it's not like you fixed it and then that company can sort of ride those waves of being seen to be environmentally friendly for many years to come. And I think the actual assessment to become a B Corp is really rigorous. So I actually trained to be a B leader before I joined City to Sea, and I know firsthand how rigorous it is. And I think you have to be committed to the end result to go through that process, because it takes time. It takes a significant amount of time to really do a good application and get accredited. So I do think B Corp's slightly different to others. But with everything, like, you have to practice what you preach. Otherwise, I think not only your employees will see through it and move to other organizations that are doing better stuff, but your consumers are going to see it too. Your customers will see that you're not being authentic to the values that you have promised, and hopefully will start directing their wallets elsewhere.
Well, yes, I suppose, you know, ultimately, I can't remember who it was telling me, you know, like at the end of the day, people vote with their wallets if something is cheaper. Which is hard, I suppose, when you're talking about reusable products and so on, right? Like one of the convenient things about all the takeaway stuff that we've, I suppose, gotten sadly used to in many countries is that it's so cheap, right? Is that something that people have tackled, that you've tackled, sort of like the cost side of things? You know, the reusable cup, for example, I don't know how much it costs, but if you're going to buy a reusable cup, it's going to be more expensive. You need like £5-10 to buy one, right?
Yeah.
Do you find resistance to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a concern that at the moment the reusable sort of market is very sort of middle class and sort of can afford it. The zero waste shops, for example, aren't known to be cheaper than going to your big sort of local supermarket. The thing is all about scale, so that's why we need more and more people to be driving their custom to those places so that they can drive down the price of certain items. And the introduction of reusable systems, so you're not having to carry with you a reusable water bottle, a reusable coffee cup, a reusable lunchbox. That actually there's systems in place where you can just rent a reusable cup with a deposit and you return it, and it doesn't cost you anything else, or anything more.
Okay.
So I think we need to see more of those systems in place.
Okay. I'll ask you two more questions and then we can probably wrap up. I want to try and keep us to the 45-minute mark so that I'm not taking up too much of your time and kind of keep things reasonably concise. The first thing, if people wanted to, you know, contribute to your organization in some way, how would a business or an individual go about doing that? What's the best way? Okay, sure, visit your website and whatever, but what programs do you have in place?
Yeah, so we're extending out our refill campaign. So we really need to get the whole of the UK and the world behind what that means. So there's a really clear volunteering offer. So if you want to be your local champion within your area, to go on your high street and to talk to your local cafe or business to see what reusable options they're willing to implement and upload that data onto the app. So there's really good, engaging, simple volunteering ops that we would really love individuals and employees to get behind. And from a business, like, funding is going to be tight. So funding is sort of what enables us to do what we do. We are very much sort of hand to mouth right now, in the sense that as soon as we get something in, we're able to then kickstart that campaign that we have put on hold because we don't have that funding. So that would definitely be my call out to businesses. Okay.
Yes, of course. I mean, funding is always is at the core of loads of things, unfortunate. It's not unfortunate, but it's, you know, it sort of keeps cropping up. So, and then sort of my last question really is, like, many times I've started these interviews with asking an individual sort of personal position on climate, for example, and the reason is that very often most of the people I've spoken to are not necessarily, it's not easy to know what their position might be, you know, like a software company CEO who's never even pronounced herself on this stuff. Obviously, you know, you're kind of aligned there, but at the same time, not everybody sort of sits in the same position on the spectrum of how serious the problem is and what the solutions should be. So I'd love to maybe wrap up with getting your personal sort of, first of all, you know, how do you feel about it? You know, is it like, are you in panic mode? Are you in, we'll be fine if we do this, you know, and what are the things you'd love to see, you know, like if somebody's starting a new charity or business or something like that, that's going to help tackle this, what would you love to be tackled, you know, first or next that would help improve the climate situation?
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because a lot of people talk about climate change, and actually as an organisation, we very much are clear that it's a climate emergency. And even changing that narrative is really important to us when we're having these conversations, because people need to realise it is an emergency. We are facing catastrophic, damaging changes to the one world that we have. And I think just simply changing that is actually a step in the right direction. I'm not in panic mode, and that's probably because I don't think City to Sea can be as effective as we need to be if we sort of lean into to probably the emotions that we feel as individuals. We need to stay focused on what our role can be in this society and what changes we can bring about to hopefully make a difference. So we've committed to really closing the gap between the links between plastic pollution and climate, because plastics is an entry level sort of area that obviously has really mobilized the nation over the last couple of years. And I think if we can use plastics as sort of the first step on sort of the education around climate emergency, that's really important. And so we want to play a role in that and really show that actually the steps that you can take to reduce your use of plastics actually does play a factor in climate emergency as well. So I think that's what I would say we're doing about it. I would say my advice to others looking to set up a charity or an organisation addressing it is first look at what is already happening. I'm a massive collaborator, and I really believe actually that it's important for us to all be coming together and not duplicating our efforts, actually really refining what we're doing and using our skill set. So I'd say before you set something up, see whether your skill sets could actually be even more useful in an organisation in existence, and how can you help that organisation, and how do you want to collaborate with other organisations to sort of come together.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Please visit fataleria.blog to join our mailing list and help support our community and project. And if you like the music, please check out the Happy Quartet on Bandcamp. That's it for today.